Hey, I'm Cyclone, and today I want to share with you my League starter for 3.23 Affliction League. Now originally I decided to start with Lightning Arrow, however I noticed that based on what I want to do at League start, based on what I want to try out and experiment with, I am going to run in some risks with Lightning Arrow, but I do get to that in a separate video where I'm going to explain and reveal my full League start plan, but that for another day. So I decided to go with a cold conversion tornado shot instead, as the freeze of cold conversion is definitely going to help with me, as well as a slight earlier increase in damage compared to a lightning arrow build, but it does come with the downside of an increased cost to get this going. I have a plan for that to get everything working, but again, separate video. So this will be my League starter. The base concept of why this build is so strong so early on is utilizing scaling flat physical and cold damage, utilizing then a Rim Thrower to convert our physical to cold damage as well, utilizing Herald of Purity for more physical, Hatred for more cold damage, and then a Heatshiver even in its nerfed state to get a decent amount of fire damage, which allows us to proc Trinity still on this build despite being mainly cold damage on the initial attack. And that meaning having a massive amount of damage just on our build, and of course utilizing Tornado Shot with the new quality to just have a massive amount of projectiles utilizing Fog as well. Alright, that's the base concept of the build. Now, before I'm going to go into detail about Ascendency, passive tree and so on, I want to mention two things. Again, this will be experimental. You can find a POV in the description, you can follow along, I will fully reveal whatever I'm doing and whatever upgrade I'm going to do in the build, I will again reveal the new updated POV. So you can tag along and do the exact same things I'm doing. However, if you just want to blast Legion and Expedition like I did last league, Lightning Arrow Flat Elemental is gonna be A-okay. It might just even be a bit better than this build. This has more damage, but it does require more cost, and it does sacrifice a little bit of quality of life to achieve that, as we are forced in a lot of uniques early. But that being the first thing, the second thing, I think I finally managed to adjust my settings correctly so that I can stream at League launch. The stream seems to be stable, my PC doesn't seem to be overheating, so I should be okay to stream at launch. So if you want to follow along at my League start journey, watch me live at what I'm currently doing and how I'm progressing, feel free to follow me on Twitch and you will get notified once I'm live. I also do plan to do a few more practice runs for campaign with this build, or well, with Lightning Arrow, Rain of Arrow League starting, practicing campaign, getting it more smoother and reducing my League start time. Now, all that said, let's finally take a look at this build. Now our Ascendency starting. We're going to take Gathering Winds on the first lap. It's gonna be zooming, and that's exactly what we want. On the second lap, this is something I need to admit, I haven't tested how much damage we have at the second lap. I don't fully remember it from last league, so I think it was fine enough, but I always like to force far shot. I will likely go with it again, but if I have way too much damage at the point in campaign, I am considering staying with point blank and going for Ricochet, which allows me to do an early Tornado Shot transition. Once I get Ricochet and once I get Endless Munition, I could transition into Tornado Shot, and it should already feel pretty good. So I would be transitioning to Tornado Shot at third lap. Otherwise, if I don't have enough damage at the second lap, I will be going for far shot. I will be adjusting my gameplay to be on a far shot range with my artillery ballistas and my lightning arrow at that point, and I will be sticking with lightning arrow until I get into the fourth lap, where I then going to pick up Ricochet, and then I'm going to transition into Tornado Shot. For the rest of the passive tree, it's fairly simple. We have bow damage, we have projectile speed, we have crit multi, we have crit chance, we have charisma for the preservation efficiency, we have spell suppression, we have life, and of course we have our instant leech, life on hit, leech package for survivability. It's pretty much a generic bow build tree. The tree itself isn't changing. We are forcing watchtowers to get an additional Tornado Shot ballista, helping us with our early pushing through campaign, and we are going to take Praiseful Assault, because I think with the addition of tinctures, we don't have the space for the Silver Flask, because we do want likely to use a tincture instead. So we're going to have Onslaught on our tree to have it safely on top of our tincture package. That's at least the assumption. Now, for the later stages of the tree, we are going to try to get an early Inspired Learning. As we are this conversion build, we can utilize the rare mods quite well. Later on, we're going to move it up, and we're going to add a Thread of Hope in this spot, as we are not going with Omniscience, which is something I haven't been done in leagues, or at least for me. We are going to go with a Thread of Hope here, getting a lot of points in the distance around here, saving a passive points, which we then can spend on the cluster. And once we get below, above level 94, we can also invest into medium clusters. I just like to do my passive trees at level 94, because this is what I assume I can definitely reach. After that, it really depends how I feel playing. If I play risky, I'm not going to get level ups. But yeah, that's for the tree. Other jewels we want to use, later on we want to use Cold Conversion Mastery, and the Watchers either get 80% cold conversion, so we just need 20% either from a rare glove, so we can drop Rim's Throw for better gloves, or we're going to get it from a synthesized quiver if they are affordable. Once we're going to have a Headhunter, or if we go for Mageblood, which I don't think this is a Mageblood League, I think this is a Headhunter League, we will be dropping Inspired Learning, which means we can save also a few passive points here. We don't need to force a Frenzy and Power Charge. We don't need to force accuracy. We have other means of getting those, so we will be able to save points here. But as this is something that, again, is experimental build, I leave it at this stage because this is what I know I can go for, and then I'm going to start experimenting and going to make PoE updates. But yeah, this will be the potential of the late game tree. However, we do want an Ancestral Vision at some point as well, utilizing 20% avoidance on our tree, getting 30% avoidance from our boots later on. Going to skip ahead here for a moment, either via implicit or an implicit suffix combination. And then we have with Ancestral Vision 100% spell suppression and 50% avoidance via avoidance capped, which is going to allow us to just have an easier time. But yeah, that much for the tree. Let's take a look at the skill setup, because this is something interesting, I would say. We're going to start with the Tornado Shot, Fork, Trinity, Mirage, Archer. This will be assuming we can keep our Trinity up. To get our Trinity going when we aren't on a Fizz conversion train yet, we're going to need a high fire, high cold damage bow. This should even it out, and we should have enough fire damage here and there so that our Trinity stays up. If we can keep our Trinity up, we're going to use crit damage instead, and if we have a 6ling already, we can add elemental damage with attacks. If we can't get the proper colors, we can also use elemental damage with attacks instead of crit damage. Then we're going to utilize a Tornado Shot Ballista, Focused Ballista setup for our single target, adding crit damage and inspiration as our 5th link, same as with our Tornado Shot. And then we have added cold damage for additional damage if we get a 6th link on this, as there's no Trinity on this. As Trinity doesn't work on totems, we just add more cold damage. Then we're going to use something that I haven't been seeing used by many people. Now, last league we got introduced to Guardian's Blessing. Now, Guardian's Blessing doesn't work with minions that are unkillable, like Skitterbots or like Herald of Agony. However, it does work with Herald of Purity. Herald of Purity spawns minions that can be damaged, that can be targeted. So we can use this to double the reservation cost of Herald of Purity to 50%, but this allows us then to use Hatred. So, depending on how you see it, this allows us to use a free Hatred for a 3-link, that, or for two additional gem spots, or a free Herald of Purity for 2 additional gem spots. And as we are scaling both physical and cold damage, this is really great for us. We then have a Frenzy, Mana Forge Power Charge setup, Sniper's Mark on hit, Tornado. Now, Tornado is another thing that works really well with Tornado Shot, and as we are pushing damage early, utilizing Tornado means that when we fire our arrows at something, a secondary projectile that would miss the target that we want to burst down, if we have a tornado next to it, they might hit tornado, and then with our Ricochet Ascendency, they can chain off the tornado to the boss and then still hit the boss. According to the data I found, this gives you about a 20-30% more projectiles hitting the boss than it would without it, so it is a decent damage boost. In big setups, meaning you need to remove Fork, because our projectiles are Pierce, Fork, Chain. So if they split, Pierce, Fork, Chain. So they're always going to split first, they then going to pierce, we have no piercing, they then would fork, but if we remove a fork, then we have the maximum damage with our Tornado Shot, utilizing a tornado on single targets. So that's what we're gonna do when we're fighting uniques like the Searing Exarch or Eater of Worlds. We then of course have Grace for our defensive aura, and then Blink Arrow. In later stages, the main important upgrade is Awaken Fork. We're going to drop Mirage Archer from our Tornado Shot, and we're going to use a full damage setup on here to have maximized on our freeze setup, so utilizing that for our survivability. Then we have a Tornado Shot Ballista. Again, this is basically the same as before, we just have a guaranteed 6-link, or assuming a guaranteed 6-link now. Hero of Purity, Mana Forged, Sniper's Mark, Brand, everything else is the same. But once we get into the late game, this is again something that I assume based on previous iterations of different builds, of different Tornado Shot builds. What I want to go for is utilizing Grace and Petrified Blood, then utilizing Defiance Banner, Vitality, Precision on an Arrogance to get our life as close to 50% as possible, allowing us to have the massive amount of allowing us to have the overleech which we get from Petrified Blood and having leech and not being able to fill the last bit of it. And then we again use the Guardian's Blessing, we use the Sniper's Spark, and we use the Flame Dash. But that's at least the idea. Now the other new addition on this late game setup is a Tornado Shot, Mirage Archer, Mana Forged Arrows. Now what this basically is the concept at least, is we fire our Tornado Shot, we already have massive damage, and every few attacks we're going to trigger this second Tornado Shot, which then is going to hit something, which is going to trigger the Mirage Archer on it, so it keeps attacking on its own, and that then is just additional clear, additional damage. And with the Mana Forged Arrows, Mirage Archer, it's basically a 4.5 link that just shoots additionally, helps us with clear, should allow us to clear our legions even faster. As for our items, early on, as said, this is very unique heavy. I am fully aware of it, and it might be what causes this build to fail, but to be fair, before that we can just stick with an elemental version, we already know how that works. The bow we want to start with, once we are on this fish setup, once we assume we have everything here, we want a bow that has a decent amount of cold damage, a decent amount of crit chance, and then multi-modded at flat physical and percentage physical. This will be better than a bow that just has high fire and high cold damage. We then are looking for a Alnos Bite Quiver, which is corrupted, so it doesn't have the life tag. This is because we want to use the new body armor Utula's Hunger, which both items are from Trial of the Ancestors, but did get added to the core drop pool. So we use Utula's Hunger to get all our life, and then we have Alnos Bite to get a massive amount of chill buff, which is going to help with our Heatshiver, which is going to help with our damage, which is going to help freezing enemies, which is just going to be better. But we do need it with a corrupted implicit, as long as that one has not a life tag, because the Sharktooth Quiver has life on hit, which has a life tag, so we can't use it with the Hunger in combination. We then use a Heatshiver for massive damage. Now, this is already with a nerfed Heatshiver, and with the League Start setup, we're looking at 750k damage per projectile. Now, as far as I know, if we have 5 projectiles, we assume 3 are going to hit. So that's almost 3 million damage, more like 2.1, 2.5 million damage per shot. And this is a lot more than Lightning Arrow has to offer early, at least on single target numbers. But again, why it will be a separate video. But Heatshiver, even its nerf state, looks really, really strong. And if we look at calculations, our core damage goes from 26 to 58, and our fire damage goes from 16 to 37. So there will be attacks where we do more fire than cold damage, meaning we will be able to proc our Trinity setup and still have it. Then we use the Brimstone Gloves, as said, to convert our physical to cold. Later on, we're going to get other sources for it, either a Rare Gloves or a Synthesized Quiver to get the last 20%, the other 80 being from Mastery and Watchers. Then we're going to use a Halcyon to have free spread. Later on we go on to get it on the cluster, or we don't need it anymore because we just do massive damage, and that needs to be tested. And then we have a double taming setup for damage and resistances. Now we are going to have 2 more rare items, where we're going to need about 60% lightning resistance, because we have a lot of fire and cold resistance already on our gear. So we're going to need on our boots and belt. We're going to need about 60% lightning resistance, we need about 40% fire resistance, and then we're going to need a decent amount of strength and intelligence to be able to use all our items and all our skill gems. And finally, we want some movement speed on boots, and we could use some armor and evasion on the belt. Now, there is also the potential of the distillery belt, which did get buffed, and we are confirmed that the tincture can be used in the 5th spot, so we could be using 4 flasks and 1 tincture, buffing only 1 flask, but we will need to see how that feels, and if we don't need the strength implicit on the belt, and eventually we want to upgrade to a headhunter, as this is a physical build, and a headhunter is going to be very powerful on it. In later stages, we are of course going to upgrade to a better bow, more crit, more cold damage, and then having unveiled physical, unveiled flat physical from an essence, unveiled physical percentage, and then attack speed craft. This is going to be a really strong bow, which is going to last us for almost the rest of the game until we upgrade to a fractured +2 physical bow, or we're going to get a mirror tier bow. Then we want to upgrade our body armor. Now we are going to lose some life compared to using Ursula Sanga, but we're going to get a lot of quality of life. We're going to get spell suppression, chaos resistance, reservation efficiency, and physical damage taken as elemental damage. Definitely going to help with the survivability of the build overall, as well as aura effect and hatred aura effect, so we get more damage on top of it. If we can find a way to get 20% conversion on our physical to cold when we have a Watchers and the Mastery, and if we can already get that early, we could consider running Shadow and Dust, or we could just ignore those 20 physical damage and try to skip first Reflect maps, and then we can use Shadow and Dust for Rampage. Now the boots we want to upgrade to, again, Chaos Rest, Spell Suppression, Life, Unveiled movement speed with more movement speed if we haven't been hit recently, or we can get the movement speed with the Onslaught chance. Either of those are going to be fine for us, because if we have Onslaught chance, we again don't need a Silver Flask, we don't need it on our tree anymore, and we might still need a source of Fire Rest here, else we could be looking to get better avoidance on the suffix via an essence, and we don't need to force 30% avoidance on the implicits, which will require an Orb of Dominance, Orb of Conflict drop from the Maven. Then we're going to upgrade our Halcyon to a Yoke of Suffering, giving us again massive amounts of damage, keeping the tamings a bit longer, but already getting our Chaos Rest at least to positive, slightly positive, via the Chaos Rest on body armor and boots. For our flasks, the belt is still a fixing belt, sorry. For our flask, we want to look at a Quicksilver Flask for movement speed, preferable with suffix, a Diamond Flask for crit chance, preferable with suffix or suffix curse effect, then a Jade and a Granite Flask for survivability with their respected suffixes. Now, with the addition of the tinctures, the most likely outcome that I see is dropping the Diamond Flask or dropping the Life Flask. I think early on we drop the Diamond Flask, and we're going to get the suffix for crit chance next to the tincture with increased effect to make up for it. And later on we will be dropping our Life Flask, and we are going to utilize Taste of Fate and Progenitus for massive amounts of effects, combining that with the tincture, with potentially or other ascendancy or other flask effect stuff. We will have to see how exactly, but with the tincture effect, that definitely gonna be interesting to those, but this is in the very late stages. Now, upgrading from the pre-Headhunter setup to the Headhunter setup, we are going to get a really good quiver. This is just classical +1 projectile quiver with like damage, physical damage, crit multi, life, but we are required of a synthesized implicit, so we can go with a fractured base. This will be then getting us the last bit of fist to cold conversion combined with the Watcher's Eye and with the Mastery. Then we want to get our rings upgraded, still covering our resistances, but also getting some life on them finally, as well as getting the mana cost craft on them to be able to spam our tornado shot even more. And of course, physical build, Headhunter, it's gonna feel really great on this build, which is also a reason why I wanted cold conversion, because I think this is gonna be a great Headhunter league. Our flask, of course, getting better rolled, getting the increased duration, getting the charge and pull enchantment, and again, movement speed, evasion rating, and then either a diamond flask or a tincture. And if we use a tincture, I would say drop the movement speed suffix and get the crit chance suffix instead. Now, that's basically really all there is to the build yet. I will be updating on it once I start playing it. Once I know what I'm lacking, I will adjust the build on the go. Now, liking a little bit longer on both the Oaths of Magi. For campaign, getting to the, for the margin of the wilds, the first thing we want in campaign is also the Magi. These are going to give us a massive amount of movement speed bonus by not using any gems in our boots, or it's going to give us a massive amount of all resistance by not using any gems in our gloves. We can do this, we can sacrifice some gems. The gems that I would be selling in earlier setups would be not using a Mana Forge setup with Frenzy and Power Charge, and then we should be good to go. We don't need the Tornado, or the Arcanist brand either, so this allows us to leave some gems open to be either a bit faster or have a bit more resistances, helping us staying at the capped resistance rate. Now once we have that fixed, we are looking into Coated Blade for the Tincture, Nature's Concoction for the Flask effectiveness and Flask uptime. Then I think Detect Evil is going to be very strong, but we of course have to see about that. And Wildwood Blessing, I think Barkskin is going to be very strong, but we have to see about that as well. Now all that being said, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the description, in the comment section. Description you can't write, only I can write, sorry. Ask me in the comment section. Ask me on the designated channel on Discord or DM me over Discord, and I will try to answer as quick as possible. And again, if any updates will be, I will be making an update video, or I will be updating the PoB, and I will note it down in the description that there has been an update. But likely I will make the videos once Leaguestar drops. All that being said, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.